Hello, everyone. Um, I thought I will provide some more information regarding, a work-based project. I'll cover some important points for your consideration, give an overview of the second assessment item, which is the project proposal, what you need to cover in those. And I will illustrate this with another example of a recent work-based project that I was involved in. There are templates and other resources on the Moodle site, and this is just an extra presentation to clarify some of the issues that came up. So there are a couple of important points that I need to clarify. The first one is that this is actually a work-based project. You need to collect data and to undertake this project in your work setting. It doesn't matter what type of work setting is, as long as it is a health-related work setting. Work-based projects are commonly called quality improvement projects. In that, as I've emphasized, you do not need to have ethics approval. It's very important. That's a very important consideration. And you need to complete the checklist that's available online. You also need to engage with key stakeholders. You need to get support, permission for access from your direct managers. That could be your NAM or senior clinicians such as clinical nurse educators, a director of nursing if it's an aged care setting, or any other direct supervisors in other settings. It's very important to get this support. It's very important to discuss your project with them and to negotiate and get approval and permission for access. There are other online resources and readings on project management that I made available on the subject Moodle site, including the reading on clinical ABC of clinical leadership and introduction to project management. The take-home message from these readings is that your project needs to be realistic, achievable, and you need to be able to complete this within the timeframes of the semester. I've talked briefly on ethical considerations, and I've spent some time on this. There are some resources online, and we spent some time during the face-to-face workshops going through ethical considerations, what it means. In a nutshell, you need to ensure that you do not require ethics clearance or approval for a project, simply because it can take anything between 6 months to 2 years to get ethics approval, and that's not practical within the timeframes available for this subject. You need to ensure that the data that you collect or access, it's upgradely available as part of your normal role. So you're not going to look for pathology, or you're not going to look for, for things that are outside the scope of practice of your current role. You must not collect data from variable groups such as patients or clients or relatives. You cannot collect direct data from even your staff members. For example, you can't do focus groups because that requires ethics approval. You can do some observations. You can do some audits where you don't collect any identifying data, but you need to ensure that the staff are aware that you're undertaking a project. You might not give them specific information of the aims of your project, but you could just say, I'm doing quality improvement project, I'll just be observing your practices, when you know in fact that you're targeting maybe hand washing, or you're targeting their medication administration principles or practices, or targeting the patient or manual handling techniques and skills. You need to inform relevant staff, and you need to ensure that everyone is comfortable for you undertaking the observations and or undertaking some audits. As I have said, your managers or senior clinicians can help you through this process. And if you're not sure, please let me know, and I can give you some strategies on what you need to do to ensure success of the project. Your proposal should answer the following questions. What is the problem in terms of the significance, Is it a local context? Is it an international problem? Or this is just an issue that is relevant to your practice, one of the priority areas of your clinical setting. So you need to clearly outline the problem and the significance of that problem. I will illustrate that with an example that I'll be providing, as I've said, of one of the projects that I was involved in. You need to have a vision for the future in terms of the outcomes that you intend to achieve. You need to have specific goals that are smart and realistic. You need to have a specific aim, objective or objectives. You need to clearly outline the methods that you're going to use to conduct your project and provide a justification as to why you think this method is the most appropriate. You need also to explain how you're going to measure and determine success. Okay, in the next pages, next couple of presentations, I'm going to give you an outline of a project that I was involved in. Please note that this is just an example. It's meant to be an example that illustrates the key components of a proposal, of a work-based proposal. I've omitted some sections for obvious reasons, and you should not copy this topic. This is just to give you an idea of what a work-based project or a quality improvement project looks like. So the first page will be your name, student number, and the title. You can present it as a separate page, as a separate title page. And I'm more than happy for you to utilize any presentation style in terms of the font, the colors. You can use images and pictures as long as you appropriately acknowledge them. The first part, this next part of your proposal is the introduction. This is really important because it gives a good impression. If anything, the introduction is one of the most important aspects of any proposal, of any written assessment piece. You need to clearly explain the problem, provide a strong rationale or argument for the project and its significance. So as you can see here in that particular project that I was involved in, I start to talk about falls as being a significant issue within Australian hospitals. And this is supported by, by data that is available from other international or similar international context. You need to reference using the APA referencing format as a rule of thumb. All your references should be within the last 5 years to ensure that they are current and they reflect the current practices. You can also provide and use local data. For example, in our project, we justified our project firstly by using Australian data, international data, and providing a local context. As you can see, this diagram provides the falls rates, the count or number of falls, serious falls that we experience in that clinical area over an 18-month period. So it gives you trends, and and visual aids are really good. You can use graphs, you can use other media to give a local context if possible, because this is a strong justification of that project. Okay, I'm describing the current practices regarding the management of falls. It's the expectation in that clinical area that the staff were meant to complete and document a full falls risk assessment for all the clients within 48 hours or 24 hours of admission, but that wasn't being done. And as part of the investigations of the post-fall management of post-fall investigations, it was a sample of 5, the random patient charts indicated that that wasn't being done. So it was identified as an issue that needed to be addressed. And we went ahead as a team and developed this work-based project. I've described the aim here. The aim should be specific, clearly defined. The criteria should be measurable, should be achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So the aim for this particular project was to ensure 100% compliance with local policies and guidelines regarding the completion and undertaking falls risk assessment for all patients who were admitted in the ward. You might also decide to put a project question. Okay, in this particular case, the project question was, What is the impact of a bundle of key improvement actions on NESIS completion and documentation of false risk assessment in an acute care setting? You can list one or two objectives. The first objective in this case was to conduct an audit of staff compliance with local policies and guidelines, undertaking documentation false risk assessment. Wanted to examine the impact of a range of quality improvement package on the timely and accurate completion of specific false risk assessment tools as part of the local policies and guidelines. Okay, so as you can see here, aims, they follow the introduction. You can have a project question and a number of objectives, one or more objectives. The next component of your proposal is the project design and the methods. Here, as you have seen, I've clearly described the setting. This study will be conducted in a 30-bed medical ward at a principal referral and teaching hospital in Sydney. The hospital is 800 beds with 500 full-time equivalent staff and provides care for over 50,000 patients per year. It is important that you do not identify places by name, but you can provide a description of the setting as I've done here. The next section is a method. I'm going to use a pre and post-test design, or we utilize a pre and post-test design to examine the impact of a quality improvement package on false incidents and completion and documentation of required risk assessments. Okay, you also need to provide an overview of the timeframes as an appendix. I'll go through here as appendix. So this is an overview of the proposed timeframes. So in week 1, I'll do the development of the protocol. And this, remember, the first process is to have meetings and to approach your line managers to ensure that they are supportive and they give you approval, they grant you approval of undertaking the project. So in week 1 is that development of the protocol. Week 2, pre-data collection. So we did for this project, the idea is to do an audit of patients' charts to check if the appropriate assessments have been done and documented. Okay, after the data collection, for the next 2 weeks were the intervention, which I'm going to discuss to you. Week 6, we're doing the post-data collection. So do another audit of all the patient charts, do the data analysis, doing diagrams, and then doing the report. As you can see along the way, there are some opportunities to have meetings with the NAM or other clinicians who are involved. So it's important for you to have a proposed time frame. It's also important, as you can see, mine is over 9 weeks. I'm leaving the other 2 or 3 weeks of the semester to cover any other unknown issues or challenges or unexpected challenges that might affect the project. So that gives you a leeway to ensure that you are able to complete it within the required timeframes. Don't put a time frame for 14 weeks because you need some space in case something happens within that period. You fall sick or there's some other unknown issues that might come up. So that's the time frame, and they're expected to include this as an appendix. We need to have an idea of whether your project is achievable within the timeframes of the project. So I'm describing the intervention. So the intervention is a bundle of key improvement actions that have been proved to be effective in other settings. So you need to provide an appropriate reference for any key points. Okay, there are 5 key components of that intervention. The first one was the NAM to send an email reminder and a memo to all the staff regarding their accountability and requirement to comply with local policies and guidelines with the risk assessment. We're also going to introduce a new practice of the risk assessment being done to all the clients regardless of their risk. So everyone was required, every patient was admitted as part of this improvement action was required to have that completed. The improvement action will be supported by an in-service training regarding the expectations. A lack of knowledge was identified as one of the reasons why staff were not completing the required assessment item. So this was, as part of this package, we're going to do an education and training and in-service on appropriate completion and documentation of the required assessment item. We're also going to put some visual prompts, some charts, some posters reinforcing in strategic areas, patient rooms, nurses station, notice board, tea rooms, to remind patients, to remind the staff to focus on completion of these assessment items. Another aspect was, to encourage staff to do this, reporting and displaying the results on the word notes and having them discussed in the weekly meetings and handover. This also has been shown to encourage, compliance and participation in activity. As mentioned before, all these interventions that you propose must be supported by the literature. We need to have evidence that these have worked in a particular setting, and you're now transferring it in this particular setting to address your research questions. I've talked about, there's a separate posting on sample size, but on this one, I've discussed that the relevant clinical records will be selected and audit for all the patients who will be admitted in the medical ward during the data period. I've given an approximate sample size. It's a 35-bedded ward, 15 new admissions each week or discharge each week. So over a two-week period of data collection, we expect it to have up to 65 patient records. The method of data collection also needs to be specified. Here it's a prospective clinical audit of a convenient sample of patients' clinical records who will be admitted in the ward. Approval has been obtained from the NAM and the Hospital Quality Improvement Committee to access patient records for this purpose. An audit justification for the method. An audit was identified as the most appropriate method, as it is widely used in healthcare to systematically examine and analyze clinical practices and identify and determine issues, challenges, and opportunities for improvement. And this project will not involve collecting data from patients or staff. It's a very important point. Data collection tool, data collected using an audit tool, specifically developed for this project, using the the National Institute for Health and Clinical and Care Excellence, or the NIST guidelines. A reference we need to put there and attach this the tool as an appendix. So this is the data collection tool. Needs to be included in the protocol and the research proposal. As you can see here, audit. You can collect things like gender and age, that's okay. What you cannot collect is the patient's medical record number. You cannot collect that. You cannot collect their name. You cannot collect addresses or any other identifying details. The audit ID in this case is just an administrative number that we just put in there to ensure that there is a way of auditing and collecting and analyzing the data. So it has got to be anonymous. Patient identifiers should not be recorded. So basically what we're doing here was, during the audit, was this completed on admission? It's a yes or a no criteria, yes or no, or not completed. Was this completed? All these things are expected to be collected as part of the Ontario Modified Stratified Scoring System. And then the FRAMP, all these were expected to be collected. So it was just going through the charts and checking yes or no on whether all of these expected assessments were conducted and documented. So you need to include your data collection tool and any other instruments that you're going to use for data collection. Okay, consistent with clinical audit practices, the next unit manager will be notified of the audit at the time it's being undertaken. This will ensure that there's a true reflection of actual practice and to reduce bias and strengthen the validity of the findings. One audit tool will be completed for each patient, and to protect confidentiality, patient identifiers such as names, addresses, medical record number, date of birth, or other identifying information will not be collected. Okay, and as I've said, the audit tool will just say a yes if the criteria is met, the patient was assessed and was documented, or no if it wasn't met. And the different points, the care points. The admission, if a patient sustained the fall, when there's a change in their condition, or whenever it's appropriate is expected. Data collection and data source, as I've said, will be limited to information related to the falls. Analysis. So initial data collection will be done using an audit tool and then entered into a Microsoft Excel. Categorical data obtained from the clinical audit will be summarized using percentages and graphs. Expected outcome. The results of this study will identify and summarize current documentation and assess whether these reflect the policies. And the summary of the results will be compiled and used to compare clinical practices with hospital expectations, and the results will also inform quality improvement initiative. These results will also be presented in various fora, such as nursing ground rounds and in the meetings. Feasibility. It's important to ensure that your study is feasible. So in this case, this study will utilize non-identified body sample from a data that is correctly obtained and available for all patients. So I have access to this data. You need to ensure that you have access to the data that you intend to collect. In addition, approval and support for the project has been sought and obtained from the next unit manager. A very important point that I also need to re-emphasize. You need to put the reference, all your references as per APA in alphabetical order and following the formats. There are resources on the module site regarding APA referencing. As I have said, you also need to put any important material or resources as appendices in your proposal. So this is just an outline and an example of a proposal. Some people are not sure what's expected, and I hope this clarifies issues. It doesn't cover everything. This is just an example to illustrate the key points. You need to ensure that you address all the components of the marking guide or the marking criteria that's available on the module site. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to address those post them on the discussion board on the subject site on Moodle, and I will address and respond to those. Other students who have got any other ideas, feel free to respond to any comments as they come in. I hope this is helpful, and this will clarify some issues regarding a work-based a project for this subject. Thank you.